Hey guys, my name is Girish, Bali, host for Back2Basics, another Back2Basics like another week. How exciting is that? I'm excited. I don't know about you, but I am. Well, anyway, so guys, today we're gonna talk to you about, well, you know what? I don't want to tell you right now because I usually tell you what we talked about, but we won't. How about that? Keep it a secret till I invite that guy. But I'll tell you one thing. Shh, don't tell anyone. He's an author, and we're gonna talk about his book also. So guys, let's welcome Rick. Rick, how are you? And thank you for coming on Back2Basics.
Thank you, Girish. I enjoy the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again. It's my honor that you are here. So before we get into the basics of the topic and your book, what does Back2Basic mean to you?
Wow, back to basic. I think that's almost fundamental today in this post-COVID culture that we find find our sense of who we are, how we live, how we even love everything about who we are. There's an essence of getting back to basics. It's more than just going back in time for some nostalgic trip. It's more about peeling off the stuff that really isn't necessary in our lives and finding who we really are at the essence of life.
So thank you for that, by the way, Rick. So do you take that analogy and put this into your work instead of your regular life?
Oh yeah, yeah. In fact, it's interesting. I think of the various compliments a person can get in life, and one that I've gotten from time to time. I take it as probably the greatest compliment I can get, and I think it's just the greatest compliment any human being can get, and that is when someone looks at you and says, "Hey, you are very real." Because to me, to be called real means that I have tapped in not just to my own authenticity, obviously, but also I've been able to exude that where someone else has picked up on it as well.
Yeah.
I just want to be real with people.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we tend to forget the realness or the normalness as whatever normal is nowadays. I mean, I don't know, maybe world is getting too fast to forget the basics of life and basics of even work. Sometimes when we are, let's say, CEOs or CFOs or any high end leaders or even speakers for that matter, when they have a goal, they go for that goal, but then when they get the fame and the money and everything else, they tend to forget the actual goal when they first started.
Yeah.
So I think it's a little tough from nowadays. So do you agree with that or?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, when you're just talking about a business or an organization, I run a nonprofit organization.
Yeah,
We often talk about what's called mission drift,
yeah,
and where we get off mission, we start pursuing things that just aren't really what we were started to be all about in the beginning.
yeah,
Out here in the great Northwest where I live, we have a little coffee shop that's fairly popular around the world called Starbucks. I've been to Starbucks number one up in Seattle, and you cannot find a seat in Starbucks number one because it was originally created not to have any seats. They didn't want anybody coming in. And by the way, Starbucks number one originally sold tea, not coffee.
that's
So
right.
I mean, it was a place where people came in. But now Starbucks wanted to create a third place,
Hmm.
a place where people could gather, and not that that's off mission, but they changed a bit in that process. But where I think Starbucks got off mission in some of their stuff was a few years ago. They started pursuing things like selling CDs of Starbucks music,
Yeah.
and kind of got more into the product of and the branding of Starbucks. And it's a very interesting story. And it's just not just Starbucks. I mean, you can look at and pick Apple. Apple's had some mission
Sure.
drift over the years
Yeah.
as well.
I
Any
mean,
of the great
Apple is one example of pivoting over to the today's market. They keep on selling stuff. I mean, first they were, like Apple Apple IIe Plus back in the days, and now it's iPhones and well iPods and then iPhones, and then now it's all about MacBooks and whatever. So I think it's more. I think the proper word is pivot over to the way of today is.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's some truth to that. Of course, with Apple, it's a unique story because in 1994, 95, when Steve Jobs came back to Apple, it was nearly bankrupt. In fact, Michael
That's right.
Dell of Dell Computers was calling, uh, for Apple, for Steve Jobs, basically to give it up. I
Yeah.
mean, what are you doing? At that point, if I remember my statistics correctly, Apple owned about 4% of the computer
He did.
marketplace.
He did.
96% of every computer sold was a Microsoft product or a Microsoft related computer. And he had basically Steve Jobs came back and he said, here's what we need to do. We need to think different. We already believe our computer's great. We just need to think different about what we do. Well, part of that thinking different, when he released his team to create, they thought different. The first thing they looked at was MP3 players,
That's right.
because they were pretty average at that point. In fact, a lot of those late 90 models were pretty bad MP3 players. And Steve Jobs wanted to create something that was beautiful, aesthetically beautiful, something that was fun to play with and enjoy. And that's where the iPod came along. And every part of it, when you think about it, I don't see them having so much. They pivoted with the market, but in many ways, Apple from the beginning was a leader. If it wasn't for the iPad, there were tablet technologies before the iPad, but the iPad made the tablet cool. There were smartphones, Android phones, long before the iPhone, but the iPhone made the smartphone cool. And what they did was they were able to take the marketplace and make it mainstream. Now, where Apple, I think, has lost a lot of it's had mission drift or pivoting, as you would put it. I think that's occurred really since Steve Jobs passed and put the mantle more to the next guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's where it's happened.
I guess it is what it is on the pivot part and the trending of nowadays. I think it's just gone too fast. I think, it's like saying that you bought a car and then you take it out of the lot, you lose $10,000 of the value of the car, and then on top of that, the technology of that car when you take it out of the lot is kind of old already. It's like saying when you buy a PC, it's already old when you leave the showroom. So I think it's the same process here. I mean, things are too fast now.
Right.
It seems like. So, Rick, can I talk to you about your book here for a second here?
Let's do it.
So, Gentech. So when I read the title Gentech, it seems like that it's more genetic tech. So,
Okay.
so explain to me what this book is all about.
It is really rethinking how we look at generations, as particularly American generations. It's an American story.
Yeah.
Although I do argue in the book that if you look at other cultures, particularly Western cultures, you probably can see some similarities because the technology was influencing certain Western cultures at the same time. But the thesis is pretty simple. We're not, this idea that we're boomers or Gen Xers or millennials or this new one, Gen Z, or the most latest one, Gen Alpha, for these little tykes now out there in diapers, Gen Alpha.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've got to get beyond naming our generations by the alphabet. That's the first problem we have. X, Y, Z, and A is just not going to cut it.
Yeah.
But they're marketing terms. And I think that's one thing people have to realize. The very first book, the book that really put the name Boomer on the map was penned in 1980. And it was, 16 years after the last Boomer was born.
Yeah.
Whereas the Gen X, that term was coined in 1991, and roughly about 10 years after the last Gen Xer was born. But then you get into the millennials. The millennials were only a few years old when millennial was coined. They were still being born, in fact. And Gen Z, which was a term that came out around 1996, Gen Z, I mean, they were still in diapers. It was pure marketing.
Yeah.
So here's my thought, and what as I was doing a lot of generational analysis, that's part of my research study and such, I just became really just struggled with these labels and these terms because they don't mean anything.
No.
And then when I started looking at my own life, I started looking at most of the time we do that. We tend to funnel things through our own experience.
Sure.
I started to realize that that technology really had a lot to do with who I was. It really formed around music.
Yeah.
I had for a long time, and I'll throw this thesis out to you and see what you think. But for a long time, believed that our comfort music, you might say, the music that we gravitate to later in life, was the music we listened to between the ages of 10 and 25.
Yeah.
And for me, my soundtrack to my life, if you look on my playlists and everything on my computer and iPhone and everywhere you look, you're going to find music primarily between 1973 and 1988.
Yeah.
That's the range for music for me.
Yeah.
I think the same thing happens with technology. I think that we come of age to a technology that's peaking, a technology that's literally having a turning point, if you will, and a tipping point, as Malcolm Gladwell would call it. And that tipping point, we're at the special time when that tipping point is happening, and so it really becomes definitive. It becomes part of our generational personality. So we're not boomers. We're more the television generation or the space generation.
So do you think it's a technology tool that these are new terms are made for kids to like a reboot name instead, as what we call it? Like I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, we grew up with Gen 1s and Gen 2s and 3s and 4s, right? Now they're coming up with Alpha and
Yeah.
Zs, and maybe there might be some M's or something like that. But do you think it's a new change of the way the kids are, because I think they can relate to as to 1 and 2s?
Well, yeah, yeah. Well, if you look at the millennial generation, classically born between 1982 and around the year 2000,
Yeah.
that's why they're called millennials, by the way, because the last birth cohort was around the year 2000.
Yeah.
That's probably the most accurate of all the terms. Baby boomer is not bad. There was a boom. The problem with the baby boom was that it was classically defined as between 1946 and 64.
Yeah.
And I was born in 1963 myself, and I never felt like a baby boomer. That's also part of the problem.
Yeah.
And the truth is that when you look at demographics, the baby boom, post World War II baby boom, started in 1943 when soldiers began coming back from the European theater. So we got a problem there, just with the tagging and stuff. But what I've done is, when you look at millennials, I've put them within those born between 1980 and the year 2000. I call them the PCCP generation.
Okay.
PCCP. PC meaning personal computer, and then when you flip it, you get CP, or cell phone. So if you look, they're one of the few generations in my book that have dual technology. There's another generation at the very beginning. I go back to 1900, and the generation born in 1900 to 1920 was known as the TNT generation. That's what I call them, TNT, for transportation and telephone. They had twin technologies too. But the millennials, if you look at who they are, they have been really defined. Their personality is defined by personal computers and cell phones. It's very interesting to watch that. And they see the world through that, which is why in 2001, I was a college professor in St. Louis at that time, and September 11th, 2001, it was millennials who are now in college. And what were they doing to get their news for the day? They weren't turning on the television set. That was the older ones who were turning on TVs.
Yeah.
They were going to the internet to get their news. They were looking online using their computers to get their news.
So let me ask you this, Rick. So if that is the case, right, there are some few countries lately, as of today, that they are complaining that 5G network is going too fast. Now, those are the people who are complaining, because people like you and me, because we're still old school. Okay. So I guess for us, it might be too fast. For them, might be very normal. Okay.
Yeah.
That's one thing. Second is, from a health point of view, don't you think that it's more dangerous because all the radioactives and radiations going around is harming the body, you think, because of the wireless 5G? I mean, that's from the health point of view. I know
Right.
that you're no expert, But
Yeah, I'm not a
just an opinion. What do you think from that point of view?
well. I'm a doctor, but I'm not a doctor of medicine, so I really have to be careful on being prescriptive on this particular point.
Yeah,
I'd have to defer. I haven't seen the research on the radioactivity
yeah,
of the technology, so I can't really comment on that part
yeah,
of it. But it wouldn't surprise me that there's always in every time we have a transition, and we're having the greatest cultural transition that we've
yeah.
had since the printing press, since
Yes,
the mechanized clock,
yes.
since the scopes,
Or
the
the doc,
microscope and telescope.
or the doc matrix printers back in the
Yeah,
day.
yeah. So this is we're not just having generational shifts today. I mean, about every 20 years we have a generational shift that's fairly noticeable. That goes without saying. What we're also having right now is a cultural shift, and those are about 500 years apart. And that is a different type of shift. And when you have a cultural shift, Girish, what it does is it literally changes the way we communicate.
Yeah,
It changes the way we interact with one another, how we
that's right.
socialize. I mean, think about social media
Yeah,
versus traditional media. I mean, all that is a shift in how it used to be. If you were in the middle, you were good. I mean, you wanted to be
yeah,
mainstream, you wanted to be mainframe, you wanted to be middle class. I mean, that middle was so important to security. But today, if you're in the middle, you're in trouble.
yeah.
You've got to get out of the middle. You don't want to be in the middle because there's nothing in the middle anymore. The suburbs are collapsing. People are going back to the city, or they're moving further out in the country.
So, so
Yeah.
on my last episode, right, on one of the episodes that I did, which was automation and humanization, right? How how far is too far when it comes to automation? Then on top of that, here's another thought process that when we have oldies thinking the new way, how do you explain to the oldies that this is the new way? How do we explain that? Because I think that this is a transition now.
Yeah.
Okay, people like me and people like you, I think we're kind of okay, but I think people older than us, they're having a little tough time getting over.
Right. Well, let me just kind of frame this a bit here. And in the book, I lay this whole thing out. The first few chapters just deal with how culture shifting, how generations shift, and how we're defining things. And then I go through each one of the generations since 1900.
Yeah.
So again, if you like generational analysis, if you enjoy history, especially American history, you're going to love that part of the book. Um, I make the proposal, the thesis, if you will, that technology. The reason I start in 1900 is because there has been more technological change since 1900 than in the entire history of the world. That's amazing. Just all the things that have changed since 1900 alone in the area of technology. It used to be much slower, Girish. You're right. It was very slow. But there's been this massive change. But what's interesting is in the last 20 years, just since the year 2000, there has been more technological change than in the past 100 years that preceded it. And what's really frightening, if that doesn't rock your boat a little bit, then probably this thought will. We are moving into a period of transition right now into what I call the hairy technologies, and I'll explain that in a moment. But there'll be so much change in the next 10 years that in the year 2030, we're going to look back at 2020 and go, what happened? And that's because there's three technologies. And in my last chapter, I introduced what I call the newest generation, born since 2010. I call them the robo generation. And their coming of age years will stretch out all the way to 2055. So in the book, I kind of move out and do some futurism there into the year 2055. And I see three technologies really emerging because they're starting to pop right now. If you're just cognizant, and most of us are, and that's what's scaring us is we're seeing these things pop. But I call them hair technologies: holographic, artificial intelligence, and robotics. Those are the three technologies that are emerging and popping right now. And the next 20 or the next 10 to 15, 20 years in particular, but next 10 years, we're going to see them really explode. Robots, I mean, we're going to see them literally become such a part of our life that, down the road, in 10 years, we just for Christmas, I bought my wife a robot vacuum cleaner. One of those, and it's, I got to tell you, I don't know what took me so long. After having one,
Yeah.
I want one on every floor of the house.
So
They're
I mean,
amazing.
yeah, but that is just iRobot or iShark or whatever,
Yeah.
right? But the thing is that there was an article that I read a couple of weeks back, or maybe a month back, I don't remember. But Germany has a beta version. Can I say beta because I think it's still in the testing phase? But
Mhm.
they have a robot waiter delivering food in the restaurant itself. There was a
Mhm.
malfunction because the battery was not charged. So then they came out with a 2.0 version of that restaurant. And so far it has been working. Now, that is a new feature or whatever, but think of it this way. With these things, we're I don't know, maybe the human touch or something like that is going away, and we're also taking jobs away too because we have people who are not that educated who just can't do anything else besides this. So I think we're taking jobs away. I mean, that's just one example. So do you think we should pivot over to new skills?
Well, absolutely. That goes without saying that with the younger people, we've got our education system is really missing the boat
Yeah.
on this one because technically, and I'm a college professor, but I can tell you that if you're dealing with any type of skill area, if you're teaching a skill set, and most college professors do,
Yeah.
you're looking at by the second year and the end of the sophomore year in most universities that your students are already getting information that's obsolete. It's not even going to be necessary for them to know that. And so you've got to, this is the hard part about teaching anything that's within the trades and particularly computers, technology, that type of stuff at the college level, university, because it just changes so quickly. But you know, are we moving towards a more inhumane society where robots are going to be? I think robots are going to be more normal, but and in fact, if you go to China, and in the book I talk a lot about this, but when you go to Asia in particular, China and Japan have both been very big on the robots. And the difference is in the Western culture, robots were more industrial. We have looked at them for purposes that are more utilitarian. We use them to extract people. The robots in our culture are things that they're claws and
Yeah.
stuff that put things together. But you go over to Asia, they are working on humanoids.
Yeah.
They are actually creating humanoids that look human, and they are so human. In fact, there's some that I think it was Iran. This might be about 5, 6 years ago. Iran actually gave a Chinese, was it Chinese or Japanese? It might be Japanese. I have to check myself there. But it was one of their robots. They gave him citizenship
Hmm.
because it was viewed as practically lifelike. And this is the difference, Gary. Girish, is that what's happened is that robots up until the last few years have always been based upon what you imputed into them. You had to put an algorithm in. They weren't self-learning.
Yeah.
What we have now with artificial intelligence combined with robots, combined with holographic technology, these technologies are merging together. It's creating smart machines that can literally outthink us. We've already know they can beat us at
Well, I mean,
Jeopardy.
if you think about it from the movie Terminator, that's kind of real,
Yeah.
right? Because those are robots and humans, flesh and blood and all that stuff, right? Then the other movie is I want to say Biocentennial. I think that's Robin Williams. He was
The
a robot.
Centennial Man, wasn't it?
Is
The
it Centennial Man? Something
Bicentennial
like that.
Man.
I don't remember
Yeah.
what it was. So
Yeah.
basically, obviously he got the citizenship right towards the end of it. So I think that's pretty cool that we are already thinking ahead as to what it's supposed to be or going to be, right?
Right.
Now the other is the AR and VR that you talked about. Now there was a conference. It's pretty funny with that you mentioned it. There was a conference call that I went in today. It was something on Clubhouse, and it was about fashion and technology room. And I said, why is fashion and technology in that room? Why is it created like that? So I was as a technologist, I went into that room just to listen in, and then I chimed in a little, and I'll tell you why I chimed in. What they're saying is that there is a holographic fashion show while you're sitting in a different stage and you're showing something else on stage. So then that's just massive if you really think about it, right? And the other the thing that I chimed in is all these robots and holograms and all that stuff. I just want to ask one basic question. Okay? The basic question is, I think we're going to run out of storage eventually. Because this is all digital world, right? Because I think it's also getting too expensive for the consumer, not for the companies. I mean, obviously they have all capitals and all to cover themselves for storage. But what do you think from the storage point of view? I think we're going to run out of it, aren't we?
No, I guess I tend to be a little bit more optimistic on that part.
Yeah.
Let me give you a little historical context, because when we're sitting in these type of conversations, it's easy to lead with a little bit of angst or fear or boy, I don't know. But what historians do, and really what great futurists do. If you're a futurist, and that's part of what I've been trained to do,
Yeah.
we find patterns in history
Yes.
and help us then project in the future. And that's all Gentech is. Gentech is looking at the patterns, and they just happen to be technological patterns for how we define generations. But when I was researching the last chapter and looking at how things were going to change, and there was a lot of what you just said, out there where people are going, well, what if, and all that. And I think it was one of the great futurists. His name's on the tip of my tongue. He's an Asian guy, Mikko, something like that. But he was saying something that's very interesting to me. He says all you have to do is go back to the Industrial Revolution. You hear the same conversations going on in the Industrial Revolution for fear that the factories were going to take people's jobs, and it was going to shift everything.
Yeah.
Or it's going to become too expensive. When in reality, you look at like Henry Ford. Henry Ford, I just learned this last week. Henry Ford kept dropping the price of his automobile the more popular it became, because it became cheaper and cheaper to create it. He couldn't envision that. An automobile in 1905 was almost $1,000, but Henry Ford was able to take it from about $800 down to little under $200, or about $250, maybe $260. He's able to do that in the course of just a few years, really, within a decade of the time that he started to have more of an industrial factory view, the assembly line approach to putting together.
The reason why I asked that question is a lot of people around me are kind of scared that they're losing data and it's getting expensive, and how do we do that, right? But I told him, just like what you said, I think we have to be a little less optimistic when it comes to these things, right? I'm pretty sure there's a plan B. There's always a plan B, right? If something crashes. But the thing is that there's pictures and videos that we're saving. I think from that point of view, people are getting scared. Right. And now it's on the cloud. So then now we talk about privacy and securities and everything else. That's a separate topic altogether. But where do we stop? I guess we're just in the beginning right now, it looks like.
Yeah, we're on the cusp of a shift.
Yeah.
And these shifts, I always, with my audiences, and feel free to do this if you want, but with my audiences, I always have them take their hands and fold it like this. And this is normal right here. Okay, this feels pretty good. Yeah. And then I say, take your hands apart and put the opposite thumb on top. It's even hard to do it myself.
Yeah.
But then I ask them just, what does that feel like? It feels strange and wrong and different, and the thing is, that's what change feels like. That's what these shifts feel like, just like that. But what's interesting is if you hold your hands even in that new position long enough, eventually a new normal starts to emerge and it doesn't feel so bad. It definitely doesn't feel wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're going to start seeing is that the technology is new. I mean, you look at self-driving cars. I
Yeah.
mean, what are they? Probably 5, 6 years on the market.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot more accidents with self-driving cars several years ago. But as the technology perfects, as the artificial intelligence gets better for reading and correcting and all that, we're going to get to the point where a self-driving car is the safest way to be transported any place.
Yeah.
And in fact, it'll be so safe that I predict in the future we will not even carry insurance. Why would we need insurance? Because there'll be no accidents.
Well, Indiana doesn't have insurance. So why not the other states?
That might be a different question, though. What do you do in New Jersey?
I know. So we should take technology as a tool instead of being afraid of it. And I think it's actually to make the world a better place. I don't know if that's the right word. Maybe I think automation as a tool to help us instead of being against us. I mean, that's how I look at it.
Right. Well, a lot of again people like to ask me, are you afraid of the coming the robots when they become human and they're able to reproduce themselves and all that? I go, you know what? If that happens, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
All right. But here's the thing. And this comes back to my own life philosophy. Let's get back to basics. Can we do that, Girish?
Sure.
Let's get back.
Sure.
I don't believe robots. And we got a good example. Just go to Star Trek. Look at Spock. Look at Data. Data is the best example from Next Generation.
That's right.
Data was a humanoid. He was a robot. But the one thing he couldn't do, even when they put emotional chips in him, it couldn't make him emote.
Yeah.
Robots will never be able to emote. And that is the one thing that makes human beings distinct.
Yeah.
Is we have the ability to emote. We have the ability to express love and joy. I would think even to create. A robot might be able to reproduce, but will it ever be able to eventually create something like a Leonardo da Vinci painting? I just don't have that confidence that robots will be that smart.
Yeah.
To be able to, those are humane.
There was an interview that I did, and it's been published already. I don't know what number it is on, but it's one of those episodes. But what she mentioned to me, and she's only 16, by the way, only 16, and she has her own quantum computing company. What I asked her about machine learning, and when I asked her about AI, she said, "You know what, Girish? Let me tell you one thing. Computers are dumb. We are the ones who actually put data into that computer." So, which means, just like what you said about, the Star Trek, example, the feeling and the touching and the understanding of human emotions is not going to be there for robots, but data and analysis and all that will be there. So I think that's what she was trying to tell me, and it made sense in many, many ways. And I don't think it'll be in my lifetime, probably not yours either, but it'll be much, much later on that when these things will happen. I'm pretty sure it'll happen, but it's still tip of the iceberg on that.
Well, the term singularity is often tossed around at this point. The idea of when robots and humans emerge into one, maybe a super race of some sort. Again, I think that a lot of that's Hollywood fantasy.
Yes.
I have the same problem when I look at the science for Jurassic Park. It's Hollywood fantasy. Will we ever have enough DNA to actually put together a real live dinosaur? No. I mean, if you know the science on the DNA, if you know the science on dinosaur research and fossils, and the fact that we find dinosaur DNA is relatively rare, and that DNA is so broken down, it's like a train. DNA is like a train, and if there's all these little cars missing, that's why if you remember the first Jurassic Park, he said we replaced the broken pieces with, I think, frog DNA.
Yeah.
Well, that's assumption.
That's assumption, right.
to create dinosaurs.
Yeah.
It works. It's Hollywood fantasy, but is that going to be reality?
Yeah,
I
don't get me started on the star, the Jurassic Park, but the movie is amazing.
It is. I love it.
But the concept itself, meaning the science itself, I don't think it has been tested or
Yeah.
carried out. But it was definitely a great movie. So tell me last words about Back to Basics for you and how you enjoyed our show before I let you go. I want your feedback on this.
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. I'm actually going to check out a few of your shows now. You got me intrigued to go into your dive, do a deep dive into your library and listen in. I'm just thankful for the opportunity. This book is really given me some good doors to pursue and some hosts to talk to, and I've enjoyed being on your show.
Absolutely.
Back to basics.
Thank you so much, Rick, for coming on my show, for making this vibrant and talk about generations. And I thought it was genetic. So it's like the way you said that, and it's great to talk to you and to get to know you better. Thank you so much. So, guys, we spoke with Rick today. We talked about technology. We talked about how AI is taking over the world and not taking over the world, and there's a long way to go. Just think about this. But there's one thing that I did say. It is just a tool. It is not anything else. They're not taking over the world. Just go back to the basics. We're using this computer, we're using this AI, we're using this automation, whatever word you want to use, I don't care, but you know what I mean. It's all a tool to help you to make life easy. So guys, as usual, as always, there is a quote of the day, and the quote of the day is, well, just like what I said, right? Technology is just a tool in terms of getting the kids working together and motivating them. The teachers is the most important. And that's by Bill Gates. I mean, you know what? It is a tool. Teachers and kids are going to be helping each other to make our better future. And that's what we're trying to do. We're just oldies. We're just not there yet. But the kids are there, our future. So guys, as always, remember, everything in life goes back to basics. Keep on subscribing, comment, good or bad, either way. My comments is so precious. Just keep on commenting, good or bad. And remember, the content is always going to be quality, host is always going to be quality, but there's always one thing. Guests are going to be amazing too, every week. So guys, take care, God bless, see you next week. Next week's episode on Back to Basics.
That thought and sort of put things in place. I think it works very well for me.
Of course. Thank you so much for that. So let me ask you this. I know that you're a fashion designer. I know that you're an interior designer. I'm pretty sure you do other things too besides that, but I think that is your main thing. But how did it all start? I mean, did you just wake up in the morning and said that I'm going to be a fashion designer? I mean, you had to work a little hard. I want to explain to people that it's a lot of hard work and a lot